You know, when God made Adam, he made him complete, don't you? He was man and woman, totally, until there was the division made, and then Adam and Eve became two separate people. So a woman really is only complete when she's brought with a man. But Adam didn't start out like that. Adam was complete. And I think it's incredible, really, that Jesus, being the perfect man, didn't marry. He lived a perfect life, so obviously, I suppose perfection is for a man to be on his own. I'm talking about perfection. Because it says in the Bible that, you know, you can follow God and you can serve God wholeheartedly if you've not got any responsibilities, if you haven't got somebody else. You don't have to worry about worldly things. You don't have to worry about pleasing somebody else. You can focus your attention on God completely if you're on your own, single. And Jesus said to his disciples, this is a hard saying, you know, and only a few people can hear this, but this really is, I suppose, the highest, the ultimate, where serving God's concerned. And then there was Paul. Paul wrote most of the letters, didn't he? And he lived a single life. He wasn't married. So there must be something to be said about being single. A lot to be said about being single. But don't worry, there's a verse of scripture that covers all that. 1 Corinthians 7 verse 28 says, if anyone marries, they've not sinned. Okay, you've not sinned. Nevertheless, such shall have trouble in the flesh. And it's true, isn't it? You know, once you take a wife on board, then there's trouble, because now you're not pleasing yourself anymore, are you? You've got somebody else to consider. And they've got a lot of things that you need to consider as well. For instance, we're all basically selfish. You know, you can't please yourself. And yet you're basically selfish. You want to please yourself. And I suppose we've all got different ideals. Men look for beautiful, curvy blondes, sometimes. You didn't get one, did you, Maurice? But then women look for tall, dark, handsome strangers, and I didn't get one either. So deciding who to marry is going to be the biggest decision that you'll ever make in your life. The very biggest decision. So you've got to take it seriously, haven't you? If you're not married. How many people in here aren't married today? Right, well, it's a very, very serious consideration, this. And you've got to leave it to God to choose your partner. If you don't, then you've got real problems, honestly. You've got real problems. I mean, those who haven't sought God to choose the partner have got problems, very terrible problems. You can see from the rate of divorce in Christian marriages now, it's not much different from the world. People are in and out of marriage. And you've got to wait for God to lead you. And I don't mean sitting down and praying, Lord, who shall I marry? You know, just live your life normally. And when God comes along and says, I've got somebody for you, then what did you say, Lord? Because you're not looking for it, you're seeking first the kingdom of God. Then God will bring the right partner to you. I was terrified of marriage. I didn't take anybody on face value. To me, you had to prove yourself. So, in other words, I didn't give people a chance. I had the huge chip on my shoulder, and didn't let anybody get near me. So the ministry to me was something that I could pursue, because I knew with all my heart that God could be trusted. because he'd never let me down, even though I was a very unhappy child. He was always there for my consolation. I could talk to him and he would never let me down. So I wanted to serve God. Because I was in the church group, because Maurice's father was my boss as well as my pastor, I was very involved with the family. Maurice has 2 younger sisters, one the same age as me, only I'm a month older than her, and another one 4 years younger than me. And I became very close to them. So I was always round at the house, and I got involved with Maurice, and he became my best friend. As well as being like my leader as where the group was concerned, I was the singer in this group, Maurice was the leader. He also became my best friend, and we've known each other for a lot of time. Since I was 16 really I knew Maurice, but from 9 I knew the family. So when God told me to get married, which was at 37 years old, and that was, I'd taken a long time, and I'd had lots of opportunities, but I turned them down because, as I say, I was afraid. But when God told me to marry Maurice, and I know God's voice, I did it. And I didn't feel as though I was taking a gamble, because I was marrying my best friend and I knew the family. Do you understand what I'm saying? It wasn't like a romantic thing. It was, I knew that God wanted that, and it wasn't a risk at all. So we went on honeymoon off to New York, because God had told Maurice that he wanted both of us to go through visions and all sorts of circumstances. Not that we knew why, but we went there. And it was a funny experience that I had, because I'd lived on my own in a flat and I'd looked after myself. I'd had lots of responsibilities. But then getting married, I suddenly felt as though a weight had lifted from me. All these responsibilities that I'd carried as a girl, as a young woman, and all the problems that brings, because if people know that you're living on your own, they just think you're easy meat. And it was just so hard for me growing up. Had so many oppositions and obstacles to my faith and living this Christian, godly life that I wanted. And I just felt as though all these responsibilities were now transferred to Maurice. He could take care of everything, and I felt this huge weight go. When we went to America, we didn't have any money. I think Maurice had £200 in his pocket when we arrived in New York, and we didn't have anywhere to stay. And we found out that the first place that we could stay at, Maurice, how much was it? About £150, wasn't it? For one night. So, but no problem for me, because now I was Maurice's responsibility. Now, isn't it amazing? If only you men could trust God like I trusted my husband. I mean, that's a huge burden, isn't it? To keep yourself and a wife for 2 weeks in another country with no money. And yet I wasn't bothered at all. I thought, Maurice can sort this out. And I meant it. I knew that he could. So when we thought that we might have to sleep in the subway, I was happy, because I thought, that's all right. I've got this big, strong man to protect me. And it's great, isn't it? Not every woman's teachable. Before I go on with my talk, I want you to understand, I'm talking principles here. I'm talking about ideals. And I know that we're in an awful society now where women have been brought up different to as they were in Paul's day. And women aren't always teachable. God's got to get somebody when they're young, if they've been moulded by the parents and by life, to have their own way, then you've got a terrible job on your hands. All right, I don't underestimate your problem. And I think sometimes, there's cases of it in the Bible, isn't there? Look at Vashti, how she was with the king. I mean, he was proud of this woman. She was beautiful, and he wanted to bring her out to show her off to everybody because he was so proud of her. But she was doing her own thing. She had her own career to look after. And she didn't want to be bothered. She didn't want to be displayed. She didn't want to please the king. And she refused. Now, he was a man in authority, so what do? Allow this? You can't, can you? Somewhere you've got to draw a line. I'm not advocating divorce, but even God goes along with that because he divorced Israel. And I think there are cases, you know, when you can't do anything with your woman, you best seek God and find out what you must do. Right, but for those of you who feel as though you have got material that you can work with, and in my case, I know that I must have been, because you wouldn't have wanted to know me as I was when Maurice knew me. All right, Maurice was given a bundle of trouble. But because of the way he's been brought up, I mean, he had a godly father, he lived in a godly family situation, and he showed me the other side of life. And that's how you can teach your wife, you see, it's by example. I'd like to look at one of the ways in which a man can enrich a marriage and help his wife, and that's by patience. Let's look at 1 Peter 3, verse 7. Likewise, husbands, dwell with your wives according to knowledge, giving honour unto them as unto the weaker vessel, and as being heirs together of the grace of life, that your prayers be not hindered. You've got to understand, men, women are physically weaker than you. And I'm not just talking about women power, man power. I'm not just talking about that. I'm talking about the way a woman's made. She's under the curse, right? She's still under the curse. And no amount of praying for that will relieve her from that curse until we've got the new body. She was cursed where childbearing was concerned. And every month we have to contend with a cycle that you men have no notion of at all. The hormones go absolutely wild. In fact, Maurice knew before I did when my cycle was at hand. Because for 3 days before, I'd become irrational. I would say stupid things. I would become unreasonable. And in fact, it's a known fact, you know, that the majority of women, when they have accidents at home or in the car, it's around this time in the monthly cycle. That's when a woman has to be careful. In fact, sometimes, you know, I'm so afraid to go and pick the children up from school because I'm just not thinking straight. My body's reacting in an abnormal way. So you have to consider that. And when they're pregnant, they're even worse. They are even worse. I would cry at nothing. My body had taken over. A little being inside me suddenly was controlling me now, and I didn't have any control at all over my life. And that was for 9 solid months. And not only for the 9 solid months, but after I'd had the baby, whilst I was breastfeeding, your hormones they're in that pregnancy mode. And you just carry on being irrational and unreasonable while ever you're breastfeeding, until your body comes together again and says it's okay, everything's normal now, you can relax, and then you can be yourself. But it's so hard for women. I know lots of women who fainted, you know, around the monthly cycle time because the body just can't cope with what's going on. Some people have it easy, some people have it hard. I was in between, but it's difficult. And it's not only the pain, it's these hormones, it's these emotions that are so erratic. But you must have patience because she definitely is the weaker vessel. You don't have those problems. You need to be stable with your wife. Let's have a look at Ephesians 4, verse 26 and 27. I'm going to bring a lot of scriptures because you're probably going to need a lot of proof that you're going to have some qualities. Be ye angry and sin not. Let not the sun go down upon your wrath, and neither give place to the devil. The Bible doesn't say don't be angry. It says be angry, but sin not. In other words, don't let this anger take a root. Deal with it quickly. Be angry, have your say, but then clear the air. Quickly. It says don't let the sun go down in your wrath, because that's giving place to the devil. Right? Now Maurice, he's had this principle all through his life that he would sort out an argument. He doesn't let it carry on at all. He didn't believe in that. He's changed slightly. Now he allows me to come running to him. But at one time he was always running to me, pestering me all the time. If we'd had a bus stop, he would run round. I mean, our house is big. You've seen it, haven't you, some of you? you know, I had loads of places to go to, but nowhere where I could lock myself away and feel as though I was in a private place where it was my place, you see. Not like being in your flat where you could run off home. And Maurice would go from room to room to room, because, I mean, I'm one of these people, if we've had an argument, leave me. Just don't talk to me, leave me. Let me calm down, let me simmer down. I'll sort it all out in my own brain and then I'll come and talk to it, which I don't. I mean, I say that, but I don't. And it can go on for a day, 2 days, a week. It could go on longer, you know. But Maurice wouldn't allow that. He had to sort it out tonight, now. And if we were in bed, you know, we couldn't go to sleep unless the problem had been solved. And sometimes it'd be like 4 o'clock in the morning and Maurice would still be at it with me. And it was terrible. Oh, it drove me mad, honestly. And I'd be angry with him, and then I'd be quiet with him. I'd try to say sorry. But if he knew that I was just saying it so that he would, you know, just to let us off the hook so that we could go to sleep, because I was bog-eyed, he wouldn't accept it until I'd broken down. Often I used to end up in tears, you know, and he felt as though I'd got to the right place then. So then he could comfort me. You know, he'd batter me down, break me down, and then when I was crying, then he'd love me better. And that was the only way that he would be happy, and then we could pray. And it was always in that order. We had to put it right ourselves. We couldn't pray and put it right because we'd say prayers that were so selfish. Lord, deal with Maurice. And I mean, I would say prayers that were so selfish. We had to do it in that order. We had to get it right first, and then pray, and then cuddle and sleep. So it was very hard at first, you know, for me. That was some battle. And he did it so many times that in the end I got the message, and I knew it would be 4 o'clock in the morning. And I thought, I can't have this, you know, it's just... So I learned to make up quickly. You can teach your wife, and it's practical experience, you know, you just got to go with them through it. Let's have a look at something else. Love and tenderness. Colossians 3, verse 19. Husbands, love your wives, and don't be bitter against them. Ephesians 5:33. Nevertheless, let every one of you in particular so love his wife, even as himself, and the wife see that she reverence her husband. But we'll forget that bit for now. All right. Husbands, love your wives. We're dealing with the guys today, aren't we? Right, now, before we were married, Maurice and I were invited to speak in Scotland. We'd been invited to a Sunday morning service. Maurice was supposed to preach, I was supposed to sing. But what we found when we got there was this was also a wedding ceremony. That's unique, isn't it? The bride and groom had decided that because they were bringing so many guests and friends, that they wanted to have the wedding ceremony actually in a Sunday morning service, so that all these people who don't normally come to church could be, you know, see what church was like. And with it being a visiting speaker as well and a visiting singer, it was something a bit abnormal, so they were doing this as like a witness and a testimony. But it was something that I'll never forget, because the pastor of the church, who's called Ben Patu, he was taking the wedding ceremony. He brought these scriptures, you see, for his part in the service. And he was saying that what the man had been given when they stood together there at the altar rail to commit their lives to God and to make the vows, he said what the man had been given was actually a little bud. And it was up to him to see that this little bud bloomed and grew into the beautiful flower that it was intended to be, to reach its full potential. And that's what you men have all been given. You've all been given a gift, a little bud, and it's up to you how your wife develops. Now, if you're a bad husband, then when you look at your wife and she's turned out bad, don't blame her, because it's your fault. And if you've been given a nice woman and she turns out bad, and you look at her and you see that she's turned out bad, look at yourself and blame yourself. I'm talking about material that you can work with, okay? You might be a really godly husband, and you've tried and tried and tried, and you're not getting anywhere with your wife, so I'm not talking to you. I'm talking, if you've been given potential, if you've been given a bud, that's perfect as it is, then it's up to you to see that that bud reaches full potential. And if you don't, you're going to have to give an account for that one day, because God's going to hold you responsible for it. The wife has been given to the husband, not the other way around. The husband wasn't given to the wife. She was given for the wife to be a helpmate for him. So it's up to you to make sure that your wife reaches the full potential that God's intended her to become. And the same with your children, you know. They're all gifts. Your produce should reflect you. Shouldn't it? I want my children to grow up like Maurice, because I see qualities in him that I'm very proud of. Honestly, I'm not just saying that. I'm proud of Maurice. And I'm grateful that I can say it, because I can't say it about my dad. I'm sorry I can't say it about my dad. I can say it about Maurice's dad, because I saw him in his home life, in the church. I saw so many things about him. And I'm really grateful that I've been born into the Barratt, not born into the Barratt family, but I've been adopted in by marriage into the Barratt family. I'm truly grateful, because I feel as though I've been given another chance. And I know that all his children have developed. All Maurice's father's children, they've all come into the ministry. You know, they're all serving God. Now, I can't say that for my family, for my sisters and brothers. I can't say that. And there was 5 of us, and we all were brought up in this Christian family, this hypocritical Christian family. And it's ruined us, really, because we know something with our head, but we've not seen something in experience. I had to learn it outside. So let's look at something else. Authority. 1 Timothy 3, verses 2 to 5. This is concerning authority. A bishop, then, must be blameless, the husband of one wife, vigilant, sober, of good behaviour, given to hospitality, apt to teach, not given to wine, no striker, not greedy of filthy lucre, but patient, not a brawler, not covetous, one that ruleth well in his own house, having his children in subjection with all gravity. For if a man know not how to rule his own house, how shall he take care of the church of God? And verse 12, let the deacons be the husbands of one wife, ruling their children and their own houses well. I know this is talking to deacons and bishops, but you know, the only way that you can get into those roles in the church is if you've ruled your children and your household and your wife well. So unless you do that, even normally, whether you're in office in the church or whether you're not, you know, you're never going to attain those positions in the church that you would secretly love to be in. And if you are in those positions, then you shouldn't be there unless you've brought up your children and you're ruling your wife and your children and your household well. And I'll tell you another reason why you need to be strong in the family, because it gives them security. When I had my little baby, Nathan, my first child, they taught me how to wrap him up, you know, in these little blankets so that he could go to sleep. And I had to wrap him really tightly. I was surprised. I had to put the blanket round his back here and wrap it all round the back here and then wrap the other side round there so that he couldn't move. It was like being in a straitjacket. And I thought, that's hard for the kid because he can't flail about. And they said, no. He's been so tightly constricted in your womb that because you're doing that now, it gives him security. He feels as though he's being looked after and taken care of. So it's reasonable, isn't it? You know, your family needs to know the ground rules. Your wife needs to know the ground rules and the boundaries. That makes for a happy relationship. If she doesn't know how far she can go, if your children don't know how far they can go, then they will feel very insecure. They will go further than the limit and they'll wonder why you've come down with a heavy hand. When I was a child, we used to finish school at 4 o'clock and I'd go off playing with my friends. I'd not tell my mum and dad, you know, because that was something I just used to do. I just used to wander off. And I used to get in some trouble. It's only God's grace that has protected me, because I found myself in some really compromising situations where I could be terribly taken advantage of, and God miraculously protected me. But you know, I used to wonder why it was that my mum never told me off. And I said to her once, I said, Mum, why is it that everybody else, you know, all my school friends, they've got to tell you when they're out with the friends, and yet you don't, it doesn't worry you? She said, oh, that doesn't matter. She says, God will look after you. She says, and if he doesn't, she said, the police will tell me if something's happened. And I thought, I mean, even as a kid, I thought, how can she be so uncaring? I really wanted her. I didn't, you know, I mean, children want their own freedom, but I really wanted her to care and to put those limits on me, because I would have felt then as though she would have cared, as though she would have loved me, as though it was important what happened to me. But because she gave me so much freedom, I felt as though she didn't love me. So your children need to know these limits. They might kick against it, but honestly, they will eventually know that you love them because you've put those boundaries and those limits. I mean, we've got fences around us. Look at the way God was with Job. The devil said, you've put a fence around him. That's not so that somebody can't get in necessarily. It's so that you can't get out as well. I felt those restrictions in my Christian life where God hasn't allowed me to do something that I wanted to do. You know, this Adam nature in me has wanted to kick against those pricks, go against those boundaries, and God has said, no, you can't do it. If you read my challenge, you'll know what I'm talking about. But it's good. It's good for people to feel security, and it's only authority that will do it. And you've got to do it in the right way. You've got to earn the respect. Don't bully them, otherwise, you know, they'll have fear and hatred and bitterness. Let's have a look at something else. Integrity and reliability. Let's look at Job for a moment. You know, he's one of my heroes, Job. I know people slate him, say all sorts of despicable, wicked, horrible things against him, that he didn't have faith, but I think that they ought to read the Bible in another light. Job chapter 2, verse 3. The Lord said to Satan, because he's boasting, the Lord's saying this to Satan, have you considered my servant Job? There's none like him in the earth. I've looked all over the place, Satan, and I can't find anybody like Job. He stands out amongst the crowd. He's a perfect and an upright man, one that fears me and escheweth evil. And he still holds fast his integrity. I love that line. He still holds fast his integrity. Although you moved me against him to destroy him without cause, he still holds fast his integrity. He believed in me once, Job. He knew that I was his God. He knew that I was his protector. He knew that I'd blessed him. He knew that everything that I was doing was for his own good. And even though you moved me against him so that he'd think opposite, he still maintained his integrity. What he thought in the beginning, he's still thinking now. Whatever the circumstances are, he's still maintained his integrity. Then verse 9. His wife said to Job, do you still retain your integrity? Curse God and die. Do you still maintain your integrity? Isn't that wonderful? Even his wife couldn't get him to go against what he'd believed, what was really grounded and rooted inside him. He maintained his integrity. Although the circumstances were adverse, as though his wife was telling him to do the opposite, he maintained his integrity. If only Christians could do that. If only Christians could stick to something. Believe God, and no matter what the circumstances are, maintain their integrity. If only Christians could, no matter what problems they were having in the marriage and with the children, maintain their integrity. An Englishman's word used to be its bond. And it's sad that it's not anymore. The amount of people who've made arrangements to come and see us, you know, because they wanted to do some work at the house and we prepared, got everything ready for them, and then they've not turned up. They don't even phone and say we're not coming, they just don't turn up. It's sad, you know, because I'm not talking about the world now, what people do outside, because you expect all that, they're worldly. But we've got our book of authority here, our plan for our life. We can read it, we know the instructions, we've got the laws. You know, Christians, we ought to have integrity, we ought to be real and honest amongst ourselves. Your checks, you know, they're not accepted now unless you've got a credit card to go with it. You can't go into a shop and pass a cheque over. Even in churches, to us, we make it a principle. They come to us with a cheque. They say, do you want my credit number on the back? I say, I do not. I do not want your number. If you're not going to pay, then, you know, you'll have to face God. That's up to you. But I'm not going to take your number. If you've given me that, I'm going to accept it. And if the money isn't there, that's okay. I'm not going to come with any comeback. But as far as I'm concerned, I want Christians to have that standard, that they'll be honest and real, that they'll have integrity. How many books have you borrowed? How many videos and cassettes have you borrowed from people intending to give them back? Go on, think. How many? Have integrity. Let them have them back. Go through your library tonight, yeah.
I've got a seeker's video.
Have you? See what I mean? See, it all gets exposed now, doesn't it?
He's got a Brown Thompson chain reference, it's mine.
Okay. Any more bids? No, but I mean, my dad used to phone up work and say that he wasn't well. And then, I can't say he'd do any decorating because my dad isn't like that. But he used to have a day off work because he just wanted to go somewhere. And I know lots of people who did that. When I was working, they'd phone in and say they were sick because they had an interview to go to, or, you know, or decorating to do. Promised to spend life with your children. Said that all wrong, didn't I? You've promised to spend time with your children or your wife. And I know that many of you are guilty of this. And you just don't do it because other things crop up, you're busy. But you know, they're precious times for your children and your wife. You know, when you say that you'll give them some time, it's precious. It's precious to me because I see so very little of Maurice. He's out preaching a lot in the week and he works very, very hard. He's up in that office upstairs and all the stuff here, I mean, they produce it all themselves. Two people upstairs. 2 people. I'm proud of them, you know. So it's very, very precious when Maurice says to us that he's going to spend some time with us. And when he doesn't, I feel so sick inside, so let down. And in the end, you forget asking, you know, there's no point, is there? It gets like that, where they lose heart. So, children will follow the parents' actions and not their instructions. If you live a life that's full of integrity, if you're reliable, then your children will be. Your wife will be, because it'll just follow through. It rubs off, you know, the characteristics that you have. Let's have a look at something else. Capability. 1 Thessalonians 4. There's quite a few of these references, actually. It says here, 1 Thessalonians 4, verse 11, study to be quiet and do your own business, and to work with your own hands, as we commanded you, that you may walk honestly toward them that are without, and that you may have lack of nothing. 2 Thessalonians 3, verse 6. We command you, brothers, in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, that you withdraw yourselves from every brother that walketh disorderly, and not after the traditions which he received from us. For you yourselves know how you ought to follow us. For we behaved not ourselves disorderly among you, neither did we any man's bread for nothing, but we wrought with labour and travail night and day, that we might not be chargeable to any of you. For we, even we, were with you. For when even we were with you, we commanded you that if any would not work, neither should he eat. For we hear that there are some which walk among you disorderly, working not at all, but are busybodies. Now them that are such we command and exhort by our Lord Jesus Christ, that with quietness you work and eat your own bread. That is very strong, isn't it? 1 Timothy 5 verse 8. But if any man provide not for his own, and especially for those of his own house, he is denied the faith and is worse than an infidel. If I had have looked for qualities before I was married, and I suppose you do anyway, secretly, whether you want to be married or not, this is one of the qualities that I'd have always looked for, somebody who was capable, somebody who could provide for me. That's why I was so grateful that I got married to Maurice. You know, that's why I could just, the burden went, because he was so capable. So capable. I mean, he used to have this idea, that there were two classes of Christians. There was the spiritual Christian and the practical Christian. Maurice always wanted to be the practical Christian, by the way. Because he would build a platform in the church. Anything that needed doing in the church or in the house, he would do it. He was so practical and capable. But my father wasn't like that at all. He was so lazy. Sorry, he is so lazy. I went the other day to see my mum. She's 83 now, 82 or 3. And I says, are you all right, Mum? You're looking a bit washed out. I had a hard day yesterday. 82 or 83, she is. And she said the washing machine packed up. It washed the clothes, but it didn't spin them. It rinsed them and everything, but didn't spin them. And I had to pull all these soggy clothes out, and I had to wring them all out. A full load of washing. And she's feeble now, she's on crutches and everything. I said, and what was Dad doing? Oh, he was doing his crossword. Oh, I did feel sad. I did feel sad, because that's all Grandad ever does, isn't it, Nathan? Kids don't like coming in round because he doesn't talk to them. He just sits there doing his crossword. He's got lots of qualities, which I will find one day, but, he likes doing his crossword. And I remember when I was a kid, when my mother had become a Christian. She was about 8 months pregnant. She became a Christian when she was 6 months pregnant. And when she was 8 months pregnant, and now this is something that happens, you'll just have to be aware of this, those who aren't married. When a woman is pregnant, about 8 months into a pregnancy, she'll suddenly have this nesting instinct, where the house has got to be made just perfect for this new little bundle that's coming in. They can't help it. The birds, the bees, everything does it, and a woman does it as well. And my mum had to have the house decorated, Well, Dad is useless at anything like that. He can't do a thing. So at 8 months, my mum was up there on ladders, doing the decorating, doing the ceiling with wallpaper. And I mean, she's a tough lady, You don't know my mother. She's a tough lady. And I'm her offspring. Poor Maurice. But, yeah, and he let her. And he's always let her. Always. He's always sat down and waited while she did it. They live in a council house. And, he's never bought anything. In fact, my mum was telling me, she said, the council have just been in and fitted us with a new bathroom suite upstairs. Because they're an old couple, and it's hard to come down once you've been in bed to go to the loo. And they fitted this toilet upstairs. She said, and I've got my bathroom cupboard up on the wall. I said, when did you get it? Oh, she says, when we first moved into the house. And do you know when that was? Do you know when it was? Before I was born. And he's just put it up. Yeah, I'm 50.
No.
And don't look a day over 21, I know you. You liar. Integrity, that was one of the things I was talking about. No, isn't that awful? I think that's shameful. I'm so sad. I hope you'll forgive me, Alex, but when Alex came to us yonks ago, 17 years ago, he was a lovely little violin player, and his fingers were so delicate, so smooth. And they're not like that now. You have a look at them. He's got lumps out here and lumps out there. Because since he came to the house, I think he can practically build his own house. He can plumb, he can bricklay, he can plaster, he can do electrics. He can do so many things. You can learn these trades, these qualities. And they will be so appreciated by your wife and by your children if you can do so. I mean, I know you'll think that they're taking advantage of you, but they're proud of you. They wouldn't ask you if you did a rubbish job, would they? I wouldn't ask my dad to do anything. You should see all that garden, you know, the things that he has done. You wouldn't ask them to do it if they did a rubbish job. So the fact that they're asking you, they're complimenting you, Maurice. I didn't find it easy, you know. Maurice has had to give me a lot of attention and consideration because I found marriage very difficult. I mean, I got married to my best friend, my partner. But after about 6 months of marriage, I wrote him a letter because we'd had a tiff, a big row over something. And I wouldn't back down and he wouldn't back down. He wanted to be the head and I didn't want to be ruled. Very difficult, you know, when you're a rebellious person, and I was so rebellious. And it ended by the fact that Maurice said to me, right, because I'd said something, he says, I want to see you upstairs in my office with an apology. I don't advise people to do this, honestly. And I thought, right, that's it. So I sat down and I wrote this long letter. And I said, look, nothing wrong with you, Maurice. Probably nothing wrong with me. I'm just not cut out for marriage. I can't, you know, I know the principles. I know what I'm supposed to do. I just can't do it. And I had it all planned out. I thought, I'll just go away. I thought, I'll go to a hotel, something, you know, I can easily get a job. I mean, I'd been in jobs, no problem. I'd had good jobs. And I thought, I'll just go away and just live my Christian life somewhere else. I'm not cut out to be married because it's so restricting, so restricting. I didn't have anywhere private in the house, no room of my own now. Even half my wardrobes Maurice took over. I had nowhere to run off to, and he expected too much from me because he wanted to know where I was all the time. He couldn't trust me. Mind you, he couldn't trust me because he couldn't trust me. I wasn't trustworthy. So that's how it was when I'd written this letter, and I gave it to him. And it had the opposite effect because I thought he'd just think, oh well, Sam Ferry, fish cake, you know, let her do what she wants to do. But he didn't, that brought him round. He humbled himself then instead of me humbling myself. And he came and he made up. And then to top it all, he gave me a car. And I'd never had that freedom before. And I'm telling you, I was untrustworthy. But Maurice put faith in me and he put trust in me by buying me this car. And I thought, I don't believe it. That means I can go anywhere. And my mind's going like this, you know, I can go anywhere. I can do anything now, and he doesn't know where I am. But you know, that did something to me. Suddenly, I felt those confines coming around me. Now, you might think that's ridiculous. But with him being indulgent with me, I felt the fences coming around me. And I thought, I can't go against that. And that was tighter, that restriction that he put on me by giving me that freedom was tighter than if he'd said, you confined, you're grounded. Isn't that strange? But then, you know, I had the children. We had Nathan. Now, I'd had this wonderful life, you know, of freedom because I'd been a single person and I'd really lived for God. At one time, it was me that was doing the pulling with Maurice, you know, leading where spiritual things were concerned. Because as I said before, Maurice wanted to be the practical Christian. He didn't want to be the spiritual one at all. When I was a single person, I used to go off for weeks on holiday, you know. And I used to go for fasting and seeking God and things like this. And Maurice he'd want to join me at home, you know. He'd want to be fasting while I was fasting. And I didn't want him to do that. He said that he was supporting me, but I didn't want him to do that because I wanted to do it, you see. But Maurice was always jumping on my wagon and following my lead and always expecting me to give visions. And he wouldn't go anywhere, like he wouldn't preach. He would talk behind his bass guitar and I'd sing and we'd both share, you see, or I would do concerts. It was usually me that was leading. So that was wonderful. That was very fulfilling for me because I knew that I was pulling him gradually. And one day God gave us a vision. And my hair was growing really, really long in this vision. I was sitting on one chair, Maurice was sitting on another. And the hair was growing right across the room, and it went onto Maurice's chair, went up his clothes, went up into his head, and you know that little patch at the top here that's bald? It went right into his head. Now, I didn't know anything about the human makeup, but apparently there's a lot of nerves here at the back of the head that rule the body. And this hair went into his head and attached themselves to this nervous system at the back here, took root. And when I pulled his hair, it just moved. As, you know, if I pulled it, he was being pulled. You know, like with a chicken leg. Have you ever pulled it like that with the tendons? Well, that's how Maurice was being manipulated by me. And then a hand came down from heaven, cut the hair, and God grabbed hold of this hair at the top of Maurice's head, and he started doing it. Right? So God was now manipulating Maurice and not me, and I thought, oh, that's wonderful. That's a really wonderful promise from God, you know, that God's going to take over. But it wasn't so wonderful when it happened. In fact, it was awful. It nearly broke my heart. Because I'd been able to pray and fast and do so many things. I had such a regimented, ordered life. And then Nathan came. This little bundle that brought me so much happiness, but made so many demands on my time and my life. I'd be up for 3, 4, 5 times in the night because I was breastfeeding, and I was so tired. You know, I wasn't getting my sleep. And I'd be awake in the day because I couldn't just go to sleep at whim. There were so many things to do. There was the shopping, the cleaning, the housework, so many things to do. And then Maurice would have his work to do, and like everything, you just expected that the house ran as it always did. You know, the house was kept clean. And then night time came, and Maurice would want quality time, and I was just so shattered, so shattered. And I had another child, and this increased it. I was so tired. Now, I knew, I don't know where I'd got the principle from, that you don't refuse your husband either your body or his meals. You just don't do that. That's not, you've got no right to do that. As a wife, you've got no right to refuse those things to your husband. And I kept to those. I wouldn't go against it because I knew my place in the marriage. But it was so hard sometimes. I'd just be feeling like collapsing, you know, and yet your husband would want quality time, your child would want quality time. Everybody seemed to want quality time. God demanded quality time. And I had no time for myself. I was just so tired. And, I mean, it's all right, you see, because, I mean, while I was breastfeeding, Maurice was sleeping. He had plenty of sleep. And when the children were sick at night, it was always me that had to look after them. So Maurice slept through all that. And then he didn't like it when the children were making demands on me and coming in when we were having a conversation. And at one time, I mean, we've travelled all over the world. We'd be talking for hours and hours on end. But then the baby would come in and distract me, and, like, you know, my attention would immediately be diverted by the child. And it used to frustrate Maurice because he couldn't say what he was trying to say, or I couldn't finish what I was trying to say. And in the end, he just found somebody else to talk to. Fortunately, Alex was there. Could have been another woman, but fortunately, Alex was there. And he talked to Maurice, and he shared his revelations, and he talked to Alex, you see, instead of me. And I felt as though I'd lost my friend, my very best friend that I'd had all these years. The very thing that I thought would have brought joy and happiness to us, a baby, because it's so much promise when it's inside your stomach, you know, and you're feeling, you know, the future's there. And then suddenly it comes, and it's just a bundle of trouble, really. It just messes your life up. Love the children, but Maurice and I, the relationship was destroyed. I'm not destroyed, nearly destroyed. It was just broken and shattered. I lost all my freedom. Maurice started taking other people to the meetings now because I was at home looking after the children. I couldn't take them, you see, because they'd be so noisy. I mean, you've seen Isaac, haven't you? Nathan wasn't so bad, but when Isaac came, goodness me, I didn't know what had hit me. And that was awful because I'd be stay at home while Maurice went out and was taking other people with him. I lost all my discipline. I couldn't get a quiet time with God. And I was still asked, to sing, to be in the ministry. And our roles had completely swapped. Because at one time they used to be calling for me anyway for concerts. But when I was pregnant with Nathan, all our musical equipment was stolen, which meant that I could no longer sing and play, and Maurice could no longer stand behind his bass guitar. God had already told him that he wanted to be a preacher. So Maurice was moved forcefully by God into that situation of being a preacher. So now people were asking for teaching and not for me singing. So I lost that as well. I lost freedom. I lost my relationship with Maurice. I lost my ministry. So many things had been flattened. But you see, this was all part of God's process. God said that he'd wanted to manipulate Maurice. And while I was by his side, I was doing that, you see. God had to cut it off, but I'm telling you, it was so painful for me. It cut me up. It was wonderful for Maurice. And I remember saying to God one day, how many more children have I got to have before I get the message? Because, I'm still not at the age yet where, I'm past childbearing. And I don't know how many children we're going to have, Nathan. In fact, you worried me the other day, when you said, Mum, how old's Tamar? And I said 3. And he said, well, there's 3 years between me and Isaac. It's 3 years between Isaac and Tamar. He says, don't you think you should be pregnant again? But God's been good, because I said to God, look, I can't have my quality time with you, Lord, and one of us has got to have it. At one time I tried for Maurice to have a morning and for me to have a morning, you know what I mean? But it wasn't working. We were both irritable then, both at one another. So I just threw the towel in and I says, right, one of us has got to be right with God. You're the head of the house, Maurice. Rule us. You get your time with God. Seek God for me as well as the children and rule us. And he's grown. But I have as well, because the condemnation that I felt, because sometimes I used to feel so condemned going out and singing, and yet I knew I hadn't had like my week's quiet time and everything. And it came to me one day, I thought, I'm a Christian because God's in my life. Not because of what I do. The Jehovah's Witnesses, everybody, they all read the Bible, don't they, and lead disciplined lives, some of them better than us. And I said, I know I've got God in my life. I'm a Christian because God's in my life. So nobody can take that from me. That's the grace of God. And while ever I was doing those things, obviously, I must have felt qualified because I was self-righteous. Being in the ministry and feeling as though I could stand up and hold my head up was because I was self-righteous. Not because God's grace was working in my life. It's because I felt in the right position. But it's not like that. It's not like that with Christians. You're a Christian because God's in your life. And if he isn't, get God in your life. Because we're supposed to live by grace, aren't we? Well, Western women are very, very different to in Paul's day, like I said at the very beginning. We've got rights now. We don't have to do what our husbands... We're equal. We've got equal opportunities in work. If our husband wants our bodies and we don't want them, men, we can take you to court for rape. Even your children have got rights now, If you hit them, careful, they can take you to court for abuse. So women do not have to obey you. Only if they want to be Christians. Now that's the bud. If you've been given a bud and she wants to be a Christian, mould her. If she's rebellious, I'm sorry, but she's not a Christian. There's something wrong with her. She needs deliverance, she needs something. Deliverance, putting away, whatever it is that God tells you to do, you need to know. But if you've been given a Christian to work with, she might be so hard, she might have had a terrible background, because we're all products of our environment. But if you've been given a bud who wants to be a Christian, then mould her.
John chapter 17. How do you think this for relationship? Very intimate. The Bible is always very honest about relationships, isn't it? Good and bad. Talks about Ammon raping his half-sister. It's a relationship, isn't it? A bad